I don't like that she's nervous.
Yeah,
Why would she be nervous? I don't get that.
Well,
right.
But don't, that's,
I'm glad.
I know how much I used to give
so
him.
maybe we need a different turn
She
in.
knows.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I gave Joe.
He knows.
I loved it. About ready?
Go
ahead.
About ready?
Mm.
Staff ready?
He did so awesome.
All right, I'm going to call to order this February 25th, 2025 City Council Workshop. Do you have any member of the public who wishes to speak to us?
No, sir.
Thank you. We're going to start with 2A, presentation regarding updates to the Chapter 110 utilities with Mr. Barrera.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor, Council, long time no see. Yeah, so we'll be going over the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 110, which relates to utilities, on some updates and revisions. Sort of a rundown on what 110 consists of. So it's got 6 articles. Here's just a brief summary of what we'll see in the next couple of slides. So you'll see Article 1, that's no changes, and that's reserved for future use. We'll jump to Article 2, Waterworks and Sanitary Sewer System, that has several changes that we're proposing, as well as Article 3, which is the Water Management Plan. Those will also have several changes that we're proposing. Article 4, Waste Discharges, no changes. And Article 5 is the natural gas pipelines, which is in the second reading tonight to omit. And then lastly is Article 6, Utility Liens. There's some few changes that we'll see. So we'll jump into Article 2. Section 110, 31, and 32, you'll see some minor changes. And I'm not going to provide all the changes because there's a lot, but the plan is to get this up for a first reading in March. And then we'll give you guys a full version. You guys can look over, plenty of time to see all the changes that we're talking about. I just want to identify some highlights on what we're proposing. So 11033, water main extension charges inside city limits. We're going to remove that section, or several sections in this section, I guess you call it. It's currently covered by Chapter 82 in the subdivision code. And we're also going to replace some language indicating that a developer shall design and install new water and sewer systems per our standards and specifications and at their expense, and also reference that subdivision code. 11034 through 11053, those sections are going to have some rewording, removal of fees. Anything that has a fee in it, we want to remove it and instead refer to the fee schedule. All right, continuing in Article 2, we have 11054, licensing and regulation of water wells. We're going to add clarification to several definitions and requirements in there. Moving on to 11055 through 11056, no changes. 57 and 58, those pertain to the use of Type 1 reclaimed water. You'll see some minor changes such as fees, certain languages we're going to reword, and then clarify the responsibilities of the users of the system. For instance, your pond, your distribution system of the reuse system, what responsibilities fall on the actual owner. For instance, university, their pond, their distribution, what they're responsible for and what we're responsible for. So we'll add some clarification to that. All right, some of the key additions that we're looking at is the water availability study. Landowners shall submit a water study showing how much water their property will provide and the number of homes will be considered based on this study. This is for properties that are coming into our CCN or wanting to be annexed. There's some studies that are going to be required. I'll check with legal on these. I think these are good. Senate Bills 2440 and TAC 230, which already require certain studies. I believe before it was an option, but these were adopted, and I believe now it's requirement. So we'll visit with our team and see how we can incorporate this into the ordinance.
What is a CCN?
The
Certificate of Convenience and Necessity.
yes,
It's your boundary for
certificate of convenience and necessity.
your boundary for who's allowed to sell water, so
Okay.
whether it's us or Aqua Texas or.
So another addition you'll see is the water well drilling restrictions. Prohibit water wells unless they meet some of these exceptions, which if it's impractical to connect to our water system and it doesn't pose a threat to our system as well. We have a well site close by. If they're gonna drill a well there, we wanna make sure it doesn't impact our system. So you'll see that as well in the, as far as some of the additions. So, Article 3, this is the water management plan. This is a big one here. There's quite a bit of changes that we're proposing. Section 11091 and 92 is just revising and clarifying definitions again. We want to add new language that enhances the purpose of our water management and long-range water plans. It's kind of like a mission statement, or what's the purpose of our plans. So the water management plan's already been adopted by City Council. So this sort of defines it. It's this is just a draft statement here, which states Kerrville City Council adopted a water management plan that outlines best practices and strategies for water supply preservation, usage, efficiencies, enforcement, and sustainability of public health and safety. This plan is intended to collaborate with efforts of other water service providers and or users as an approach to water stewardship and compliance with regulatory authorities and local, regional, and other state plans. Key thing to keep in mind is that water conservation is the leading strategy in our long-range water plan. Other cities within our region have adopted similar ordinances and best practices that pertain to conservation. So you look at other cities around here, Bernie, Fredericksburg, San Marcos, other cities have adopted some very similar practices that you'll see in the next couple of slides. So 11093, I wanted to leave in there year-round because I did strike that, but it's now we're gonna propose to name it just water conservation measures. And you'll see that year-round in another slide on how I want to propose to remove it. But some of the measures that we're looking to implement include to implement heritage landscaping recommendations that limit turf grasses and other drought-tolerant species. You know, we want to eliminate some that are water dependent. Also restrict any kind of new development to either have no irrigation systems or have minimal irrigation systems. There's other alternatives, rainwater harvesting. We can look at doing a combination of. So there's some other options we can look at. One of them here at the bottom is to define functional and non-functional areas and add allowed uses during drought stages. Those pertain to areas that are being irrigated. If you have a functional area, which is an example like a playground, right? That's a functional area. If you have an island at a commercial property or somewhere that has irrigation to it, a landscape island, that's non-functional. So during certain stages, let's just say an example, stage 1 and 2, you're okay. Stage 3, non-functionals are not allowed to be irrigated. Okay, so you'll see that coming up as well. More stuff on Article 3. We'll go 11094. Which actually 11093, it's a continuing of that. So one proposal will be it's to switch to watering once per week for automatic systems. Right now we water twice a week, which is Tuesdays and Wednesdays, Saturdays and Sundays, twice a week. So we'll recommend going to a once a week, which will be Monday through Friday, based on the last digit of your address. And it also allows for enforcement because we're eliminating weekend watering. During the weekend, we don't have folks that are out there monitoring people that are irrigating. So it does allow us to enforce a little bit better during the week. Right now, there aren't that many utilities that allow for twice a week. There's very, very few. Most of them are once a week. And we can make the arrangements on the hours so we can kind of help folks out to give them a little bit more. But I think that's a good idea, moving to once a week watering, but we'll bring that up during the first reading. Another measure is to develop seasonal measures, which is spring, summer, fall. You know, if we do adopt that once a week watering, that's allowed during those 3 seasons. And then in the wintertime, which we'll consider December, January, and February, no watering allowed. And this is for automatic systems, okay? So we can also look at developing drought surcharges and determine what stages to implement them. I have to visit with finance and see how that model is going to work, how that affects certain fees, as well as the last bullet point here, the tiered surcharge for excess water usage. What trigger points do we want to look at? Yes, sir.
Are we still talking commercial or residential or both?
Both.
Both, okay, thank you.
And I visited with Julie yesterday and kind of get a snapshot of what our customers look like as far as what type of accounts, what type of usages do they have right now, you know, historical trends, and see how these last two impact those customers.
So the watering, the irrigation has been a major source of funding for the water supply, right? So it is, the people want to water are gonna be less happy, and the people that don't water are gonna be less happy because their bills are gonna go up.
Right. Yeah.
So everybody's gonna be unhappy.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, on one hand, you want to conserve, on the other hand, you're looking at revenue.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we gotta have that balance somewhere, but we gotta have our conservation hat on for some of these right here. So,
I'm afraid so.
all right, so 11094, this one has that year-round prohibited uses of water. Again, we'll eliminate that year-round because this section, we're gonna revise the restricted hours. And in the next slide, you'll see how that year-round stage, I guess you would call it, we're looking at to eliminate that. So we'll have to revise the hours on that. Water running more than 10 feet away from intended area deemed for irrigation, you know, maybe implement a excess water fee or wasting of water. Where you'll see, this is not a prime example, but you'll have areas where you're trying to irrigate your yard, but then there's water going down the street. Our roads don't need to be watered. So, matter of fact, we do not want any water on our roads if possible. So we're looking at that. 11095 and 96, they relate to permits. There'll be some minor changes such as just rewording on some of those, nothing major. All right, now to some good stuff right here. So 11097, the stages as they're defined. These are some considerations to eliminate the year-round. So I think we should start at stage 1, have that as a minimum, and eliminate that year-round allowance, which allows you to water every day, only during those certain times. But the key thing is allowing someone to water every day. I don't think no one should be watering every day. Again, it's going with what cities in our region are doing. Other cities, it's almost rare to find that you're allowing somebody to water every day. So I think it's a good start to just utilize from stage 1 on up. And also consider utilizing 4 drought stages. Eliminate stage 5 and sort of blend stage 5 into stage 4. The only difference you're looking at is it's still irrigation is prohibited in 4 and 5, but you're allowing hand watering. At stage 4, there's not much hand watering that should be occurring at that point, right? So things are looking pretty bad at that point. So we'll look at maybe reducing the hours, but nonetheless is sticking to 4 stages. And then if we adopt that winter conservation period, we can still go with 4 stages to include the winter conservation period, which will be active regardless of what stage it's in. And again, that prohibits the use of irrigation, and we may allow handheld watering only.
How often have we been in stage 4? And I don't remember.
Think, was it
The year before last, we were in the fall.
once?
Not too often.
It's not too often.
I didn't think so. I was just curious.
So can we make stage 1, move it over and have it be the regular, and then stage 2 is now stage 1, and stage 3 is now stage 2?
Sorry,
Okay, so we're gonna kind of eliminate the year-round
correct.
column. So so the stage one really becomes normal. Right?
Not, I wouldn't say normal, I'd say that's
We
the
start
minimum.
out in
We'll start out in
stage
stage one, so
Normal.
we're always gonna have that restriction.
We're always gonna be stage one.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that's not really, that's normal then.
Well,
Let's don't call it a stage.
No, it'll still need to be a stage, because you can,
Well, we've got one here now that's not a stage. Why can we not still have one that's not a stage?
yeah, so that year-round water conservation,
Right?
that is,
Well, I know, but just make stage one year-round water conservation. And then stage two is then now stage one. We only have
Yeah,
three
I-
stages.
okay.
I mean, I'd like to get off of those old stages that make them all different. I think let's have the year-round be stage one. Then
Oh, yeah,
move them all
yeah.
over one.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying, moving stage one to,
matter just what you call
Year-round.
it.
Right.
I'm gonna,
So we're not really in the drought stage when we're in stage one anymore, that's just it. Now, so it's not really a drought stage.
not a drought stage,
Now,
that's-
until we go to stage two, which we're gonna call one.
Okay.
I mean, that's,
yeah, no, we can word
think
it differently and
about
see how it looks once we map it out.
I need to come to this side of the room real quick. Because I'm fixing to poke a bear. But how would that do with
It doesn't matter.
with headwaters?
Doesn't matter.
well, it gets us off of them even thinking.
You know, while there's still challenges going on, and I defer to the legal side of that, but operationally, we are separate. It is separate, and whatever council decides to do as far as the city's drought management plan is up to the city council.
So the next slide will cover a little bit of that. There's a guidance document that we want to refer to that
Haven't been in year-round.
handles headwaters. But we can put some of these together and look at how the stages will look once we move them around. And then we'll bring those up for,
But the thing really is
Recommendations.
now that, stage one is really not the drought stage anymore, it's a regular stage.
that's how you word it. I mean, drought stage.
Yeah, but so you're saying we're always gonna be in the drought stage. And I would say, well, let's not be in the drought stage all the time. We're gonna be in conservation mode.
Right.
But not really a drought stage.
Not a drought stage, right?
Councilmember McKinney or council, mayor, council, and I think I understand what councilmember's saying, and I see the point. I think it's a matter of semantics, and I think if we called it, instead of drought stage 1, 2, or 3 or year-round, could it be light, severe, moderate, extreme? You know,
Yeah, but one's normal, or some sort of a name that's not a drought stage, because it's just a normal conservation.
But it's different. In other words, it will be a new normal,
It'll be a new normal, we're gonna change normal.
right?
it
But
becomes
when
a
you
new
say
normal. So
normal,
what that new normal looks like, whether that's, to the point of whether we call it stage 1 or light or year-round, it still doesn't take away what that stage says.
No, I'm in agreement with all that, but I just think we need to move. And so that sometimes we don't say, well, we're not in drought stage, we're normally conserving, but we're not in a drought stage.
I don't know, my thinking is we're always gonna be in a drought stage
Yeah, but
in our thinking, and so whether you call it stage 1 or year-round water conservation, as long as it's doing the job of conserving water, call it anything. I mean, call it stage 1, and it's the new set of guidelines that we're gonna use. Because I'm afraid if you say this is normal, normal's changed.
It's,
So,
Yeah, you're creating the new normal. We can explore some of that. I think really the meat of it would be, is within those stages, take the manner of water use out. Within those stages, the criteria of the timing, the usage and all that,
using all that.
is that kind of the direction that council wants to go? What we call those stages, I think we could work through.
Right.
but,
Yeah,
I just don't think, it'd be nice not to say, we're forever and always gonna be in a drought stage. We're always gonna be conserving, but we're not always, we won't call it drought. Because if we're not in a drought, we're still gonna have a drought stage.
and I defer to council on those, but.
Okay. We have rain for 6 months in a row, we're gonna call it drought stage. Okay.
Okay. All right, moving on. So 11098 is changing and notice of safe operating capacity. We want to add a requirement on here to post the Water Conservation District's drought information on our city websites, notices, things that go out to be able to tell folks, hey, here's what the Conservation District's information is currently. Also, a reference guidance document to assist with drought stages that coincide with the Water Conservation District. Again, it's our plan, however, I think by default, it's going to coincide with the Water Conservation District's, what their stages are and how their system's tiered.
Yep.
So, yes, sir?
Our drought stages aren't like their drought stages now, right? So they're not the same.
Well, no, once
And there's
we,
confusion that people think they're the same, and they're not. And so the more we can get away
from the,
from that, and that one thing that would do that was call our stage 3, which they're in stage 3, but our stage 3 happens to be similar to their stage 3, but it's really not at all like their stage 3. I mean, it sounds the same, but
right, drought
It's
3,
not.
yeah, I mean, stage 3 means,
if we
yeah,
call our stage 3 2, well, then it begins to break the
right.
connection. It's not a connection, then we need to make clear it's not a connection.
So if we go with some of the changes in the previous slide with our stages, we will develop a new matrix. Stuart Barron developed this matrix here, and I think, if we eliminate stage 5 and the year-round, we'll just shift everything over, and I think it matches up already. So I don't see that being a problem if we revise the stages. And we're gonna overlay them to see how they're gonna match up. But again, as Dalton alluded to, we have our own plan.
But you can't really, I mean, we will look at different things than groundwater district looks at.
Right.
So it's pretty hard to match them up. If you're saying you're trying to match them up or overlay them, they don't really overlay.
Right, so our conservation measures, we're not putting them in place to match theirs.
Right.
I think there is a lot of similarity in it, though, based on what their stages are and how they define their stages. The end result.
Yeah,
If
but
they're in
we
stage
have
2,
surface water and they don't.
right,
So-
oh yeah, no, it's not a,
So it's not
Right.
easy to,
right.
you can't really overlay them.
So we'll revisit this guidance document and see how we can reword things and make a fit. Make them fit, sorry. What else we have? Okay, so continuing Article 3, 11099 through 110-106, again, minor changes, and just revise accordingly based on what direction we go with on some of these stages. Article 4, waste discharges, there's small amount of changes on there, as I mentioned earlier. Article 5, second reading to omit tonight, and 6 has minor changes. All right, so getting close to the end, updating Chapter 110. Again, it's intended to collaborate with efforts of other water service providers and utilities. Again, it's an approach to water stewardship and compliance with other authorities and other plans in our area. And lastly, it relates to the 2050 comp plan action item, which is to implement a strong water conservation plan and include additional conservation measures and programs. So I think we can achieve that by some of these recommendations we mentioned earlier. And any other questions?
Will we get a copy of these slides that you presented today?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
So we get a red line thing when we get,
Yes.
when we go to. Seems like we could almost make stage 3 normal. You're doing that partly because you're gonna restrict to only 1 day a week instead of stage 3, but it seems like we could almost do stage 3 and make it normal. But anyway.
So on that, Councilmember McKinney, and really on some I guess, guidance, to our team, what's mayor and council's thoughts on that? Trying to obviously find the new normal. What does that look like? What we call it, we can make it a happy face, sad face emoji. We can do whatever we want on that front. But as far as the content of it, what's everybody's take or thoughts on kind of, we'll call it that new normal, to give staff some guidance?
I'll go first. I always try to think about what have we been training and educating and giving the public to think about. I almost think you start to change it up a lot. It just muddies the understanding of what it is we're trying to do. So I would like to try to stay as close to what we've done in the past so that there's no confusion as to what we're changing, what we're trying to adapt as conservation measures versus what we've been doing. And I don't know that they get that lost in numbers. I almost think maybe we should call it a different thing as far as not numbers. Maybe it's the new
Light,
normal,
medium, heavy,
the next
or whatever.
normal.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. I always try to figure out what is the easiest thing for the general public to grasp without panic and, sending scary measures out. If we have to do that sometime, we may have to, but
I agree with you, and, confusion, mass confusion, we all know how that works sometimes. You can name it Conservation Group 1, 2, and 3 if you wanted to, or low, medium, moderate, high. I don't think we need to try to sit here and hash out names for it right now, but it's a hot topic. It's always going to be a hot topic in town and the surrounding area. I think, Dalton, we can go back to one of our old acronyms, KISS. Keep it simple, silly. Just as easy as we can make it for transformation and just so everybody can grasp it and get a hold of it. But we also know that not everybody's going to abide by it. Mr. Barrera, you say,
What?
You can water one time a week. Well, you can also drive through some neighborhoods and see water sprinklers going 7 days a week.
And so there is an operational plan, as y'all, this unfolds, where we would be upping enforcement and what that would look like. So that is part of the operational side of things, post council's decisions.
So that's where it goes back to like when we were in 4 last year. Citizens were having to report, and everybody knows your neighbor's probably the first one that's going to report you if you're doing it and they're not. So that's kind of where I'm at on it.
Good. Mr. McKinney?
So, seems one simple way to do it is we've been through the last 2 summers, stage 3. Everybody's been through 2 summers in a row and saying, oh, that's the new normal. We've just been through 2 years of it. We got by just fine. That's a new normal. That's pretty simple. I think that might be the simplest way.
Well, hey, I agree with Delane as well. I mean, I think that we need to keep it simple, as Councilmember Harris alluded to, and I'm more concerned with the enforcement, because after 2 years of going through stage 3, I didn't really see any remedy for those who were not conforming to stage 3. I still saw them watering every day, all day long, peak hours of the heat, and I never saw the enforcement, although I know that complaints came in. So I'd like to focus on making sure that however we set up the stages, that they are enforced accordingly.
Staff receive enough consensus from this? Any others?
Good.
Good?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Let's move on to 2B, presentation regarding permitted, pending, and potential development projects. Mr. Harness.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for taking the time this afternoon. It's fun to do right after this utilities discussion, and I think it's apropos. So, don't yell at the messenger exactly. As you see some of this, because some of this will look shocking on its surface level. And just remember that a lot of this in the pending and potential is, people kicking tires, right? And all of these development considerations, especially the larger ones, will span a decade or more. So for those of you that have been around long enough, Comanche Trace has been building for what, 20 some odd years right now, right? So it does take a while. Remember, these things won't happen overnight. They don't come overnight. So we have a little map here that Joshua Young, our GIS coordinator, put together for us. And so Joshua's fantastic, and we appreciate him. So this is just kind of a story map kind of showing these things. So we'll get into kind of permitted and what's really turning dirt right now, or is probably going to turn dirt any minute. And then we'll get into kind of pending and potential. Bear with us a little bit, because the pending and the potential sort of are the same thing. They're kicking tires. They may have had a permit lapse, they haven't done anything, or they have come through and talked about it several times and nothing's happened. So, just think about it as stuff's turning dirt and stuff is just sort of being thought through, both as the pending and the potential. Does that make sense? Some of the pending will happen. Basically, if there isn't a stick of wood coming up outside of a flat concrete pad, I don't assume that development's happening. That's how I've always run, projects, and until that dirt is really turning, it's not actually happening. So, all right. So we will start off with permitted projects. So, Bluewood Phase 1. So everybody knows that apartment complex is coming up, and that's the first phase of potentially a 2-phase project, but right now they only have plans for first phase, and that's 273 doors. And they should be up and running on their first building. I think they talked about the beginning of next year, first quarter, second quarter of next year, and then subsequent buildings will be going up after that. Next one here, and we're kind of talking about sort of bigger developments that are in like the 40, 50 and above range. So there are some smaller ones that aren't going to be on here. Freedom's Path 2, everybody knows there was a resolution that was passed kind of allowing that second phase of that. So that's primarily going to be for veterans on the VA property, and that's going to be about 50 to 60 units. Next one here, this is not all encompassing. There were multiple phases of Comanche Trace that are kind of in development, but this is the largest one that's on the back end. And I think this is more of a denser product, not a denser product, but more of a smaller home. I don't think it's going to be, really nice, but I think it's going to be a little bit less expensive maybe than the current homes that are being sold at Comanche
Yes.
Trace. I'm trying to find a nice way to say that. That's going to be in that middle high range, I guess. And moving on down. So Wind Ridge we've been discussing. So that plat is just the first plat, so that's why it's shown that way. But the master plan encompasses kind of the entirety around Hal Peterson Middle School, and that's going to be 490 homes. That first phase is about 240 houses. And then Mariposa subdivision from Habitat, they've got, I think that number is incorrect. I think it's actually 43 houses. But they're going to do about 11 traditional Habitat homes and then about 30, 35 more production houses out in that. And they're well on their way in their infrastructure and being complete with that.
You say some of those homes are going to be more market value, or are they all going to be?
So it's a hybrid model that they're working on. So it's 11 of the houses will be the traditional Habitat process with the volunteers and everybody's out there. And their plan is for the remainder of the 3/4 left over to be done at a traditional kind of a stick-built, but also utilizing kind of, friendly rates, so that way they can keep those rates down, using local labor and local suppliers, trying to keep that into that 80% AMI for those ones.
Okay.
Okay. And so, that's kind of, it's turning dirt and it's fairly big. There's some smaller ones, like you see houses going up on maybe Jackson by Harper, right? You've got some smaller infill lots. Didn't really want to, I'm not going to put all those things in there. So getting into kind of the planning phase, and the potential phase, so Brinks Crossing is a project that happened a few years back, was permitted for an apartment complex that would have 2 phases, and both phases would be 470 apartments, and then a bridge that crosses Camp Meeting Creek, and then the plan was for them to do sort of large lot homes on the backside. Haven't seen or heard much from that at this point, and so still again in the potential phase, all right, planning phase, I guess. Calhoun's Planned Development District, so this is much bigger than what you see here, and I think in '04, this encompassed area that included the soccer field, the baseball fields, and kind of all the way up to I-10 and kind of all the way over to Harper. And it envisioned about 500 or 600 homes in total with a kind of a smattering of commercial space in between. Now the Bluewood is being built in one of those sections. I think you have a few different owners now, so that PDD still exists, although some of it would need to be modified. But it allows for residential, commercial, multifamily. I know people talked about hotels at a certain point over there. I'm still trying to get somebody to do the indoor entertainment right over there. It's a perfect spot. It's a hot day out. You don't want to be at the baseball fields. Grandma needs to go inside with the babies. Put them right there.
Bowling alley?
It's one of my missions here. It's my kid's mission for me. I need to do it for him. Okay. Cypress Creek Apartments, there was a conversation, I think, at P&Z the other day about senior housing on the other side of the road. There was some neighbors who showed up and kind of were discussing. This is adjacent to Tybee Mountain. They were proposing about 150 senior apartments, I think with 80 in a future phase. And across the street at Camp Meeting Creek and 534, some developers have talked to us about conceptual plans for some multifamily there as well. Moving along, Kerrville 38 is an idea from the same gentleman who owns the Creekside Crossing, the Brinks Crossing development. So they had proposed 312 apartments there. Again, that's still just kind of a concept that is being discussed. Wanted to bring Megacrete up because it's kind of the biggest commercial development that's coming into town. So as those of you know, that's an autoclave aerated concrete, which is a lightweight concrete material. Those folks are going through their TCEQ permitting process, which is slated to take several months. And if you remember, this is at the end of a current dead-end line that requires us to do a whole lot of flushing out there to make sure we're still compliant with TCEQ. So they're going to help us alleviate that because that creates a connection at the end of the line there. The landing. So over at the landing, this would be phase 2. They're looking at 104 apartments. I think they're looking at some senior housing as well, and a mix of commercial spaces there, along with Granger McDonald Park, which is under construction, well, under design at this point. And Tybee Commons. So Tybee Commons is a project that we've been discussing for a while. This one is, they've talked about 320 apartments is what they were looking at on the back end facing the golf course and the tennis center. And then retail at the front. This has, there's a big sewer project that's part of our water and wastewater CIP plan. So one of these, this project is not, it's kind of a developer-driven project, and so that's sort of stalled this project for now. Whiskey Springs. So this is a updated plan development district for a proposed golf course. And they have about 368 homes, multifamily. They're looking at 70 apartments, and a 430-room hotel is what they're talking about. And about 250,000 square feet of commercial space along the frontage of 16. This, like all the other parks, irrigated areas in town, would need to be irrigated with reuse water. We're having discussions with them about how to accomplish that. So again, still kind of in that planning phase with those folks. Okay, and again, forgive me for the potential and plans. Don't get too tied down into those. So this, I wanted to highlight just Jellystone, but sort of everything west of 27 going towards Ingram. All of those things have a limitation right now because there's a very large sewer expansion project that would need to get done to allow for increased expansion. Basically, those sewer lines are full. And so, but they've expressed an interest in wanting to build some more cabins out there to allow for some more guests, and sort of increase their capacity. This one's gonna be the one where everybody goes, that's a lot. So this was a planned development district that was proposed when I first got here. I think it was my first week on the job. DA handed me this and said, go figure this out. This was like 1,700, 1,800 doors all together with a hotel and commercial space. And it went through planning and zoning. Mr. Councilman Harris, I think you might have been on P&Z when this was there.
Yes, sir.
It made its way through P&Z and was kind of halfway through annexation and sort of died on the vine. There was substantial infrastructure requirements that needed to happen in order for this project to make. And so that deal fell through, and is no longer under contract with those folks, and that's now been a couple of years. There's commercial frontage on 534 that Shriner owns that they retained after selling to Lennar, and that's going to be a mix of commercial in their retail and commercial in their mines. People have talked to us about the area surrounding and around Tybee High School for mix of mostly single-family homes, and commercial is what they were looking at along the frontage of 534.
Michael, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
Back, one more, right there. Isn't the swim school going in somewhere in there?
That is further down, so where the fire station is,
Yes.
they're right below that. That's where their property is at, just below the fire station.
Thank you.
3? Yeah?
Fire station 3.
Thank you, yeah. Okay, we talked about that. So Thompson Drive, the area next to the landing, it is for sale. A significant portion of this land is actually in the floodplain. But there's buildable space up here, and just conversations with staff, nothing concrete, as well as conversations across Thompson Drive for, I think, large lot homes is what some folks were looking at on that side as well. But again, nothing more than just kind of conversations at this point. And then, conversation we had 2 weeks ago, right? So this, what we had talked to the developers on was, there's a big giant hill there, and big beautiful house on top of that hill, and we like our hills, and so it was interesting conversations, but that was again the last one, that most recent one that we talked about. All right, Martin, we can go back. Martin, did I lose? There he is. All right. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to kind of summarize all that, because I know that's a lot, right? So from the permitted side, you're looking at about 1,200 homes, 1,200 doors, right? Between the apartments, both the Bluewood and Freedom Path, Comanche Trace, Lennar, and the Mariposa. I'd say out of the ones the Comanche homes, I think traditionally what our housing study has said is that that's about 70% retirees, right? And so imagine that would continue towards that phase as well. But again, it still doesn't change the fact that there's 1,200 doors that are kind of under some form of construction at this point, and will be. Now, Lennar's project, they've said they were going to build roughly 60 to 70 homes per year in our contract. So that'll start next year, and that has kind of a 10-year timeline. Right, so that's not going to be 490 homes next year. That's going to be 490 homes over the next, into 2035 probably. Mariposa, I think will go, a couple of homes a year for the Habitat versions, and then if that production build goes, probably 15 to 30 homes in that 1 or 2 years. I just wanted to kind of show everything, and here's what the highlights is the bottom, right? So what are the totals in that? So of those planned phase projects, you're looking at 1,900 doors, right? And a hotel and commercial space. And those are kind of ideas that are still being kicked around, but have legs on them. They've been through permitting, they've maybe got a building permit that's lapsed, or they've gone through platting, and now they're just waiting to get their infrastructure in, or they're financing, but they've kind of gone through a lot of those processes. I think Tybee Commons might be a little further away from that, and Kerrville 38, and Callow, so. And then of the potential projects, you're looking at another, 1,500 doors in that kicking tires. I didn't include the reserve because that was a project that, it came and it went. I don't think it had legs, and so I didn't want to include that in a total. But
Where
so,
was that gonna be? Where was that gonna be located?
so that was on the Keeble property, so adjacent
Okay.
to Kerrville Shriner Park. Yeah, that was kind of connecting, it was gonna connect both the highways, so create a spur between 16 and 173. Which I think the River Hill folks would be excited about because that would kind of alleviate some of that traffic through Riverville Boulevard. So, you got 1,200 there, you've got 1,800 here, so you got 3,000, you got 1,500 in this. So you're looking, all in all, that's a big number, right? It's 4,500. But again, it's just people kicking the tires. Again, remember, until there's a yes, and there's a pad, and there's utilities and sticks going up, it's all just an idea.
Wasn't there one on Highway 16 across from River Hills, like southern entrance?
Yes, so, what was
don't
the name?
remember what it was.
Vintage Heights?
No, not Vintage Heights, on the other side.
There's the one with the,
That's the remainder of Briggs Crossing, yeah, so that's,
Oh, okay.
they own the whole thing, so half of it was multifamily and then Bridge Crossing and then, single-family
Okay,
development.
that's the Brinks Crossing then, okay.
So y'all will see this later on this summer as a final copy, but the draft of the housing study says that there's demand in Kerrville for anywhere between 2,000 and 2,500 doors. And they say.
Over what time period?
Well, so it could be a 10-year time period. It's, what it also says in that draft is that there's between 800 and 900 that are under construction or in development, some phase right now, and that should be able to withstand the need for the next 2 years. So that's part of that language in there. So part of it's really great news that you're working towards that housing goal. When I first got here, we had the housing symposium. The second year I was here, we had the housing symposium. I don't think my conversation changed from the first to the second. And that was a tough time, because it was hard to get things off the ground. So, y'all have accomplished quite a bit so far. And how they calculate that computation is they want about 30% of the folks who commute from over 50 miles away to live in your town. And so that's about 1,100 people that commute in out of the 4,000 people that commute in daily for work. And then they also take in the home sales per year. And then they look at the number of jobs that are open and the jobs that are coming up. So you take all three of those together, you're looking at about 2,200, 2,300. So that's why you have that range in there. So what you have in the potential and the planned and the permitted is in excess of what you see as a need from your housing study. And I wanted to kind of go through quickly a couple other pieces. So these are considerations that our engineers look at when they do a calculation of demand on our system. So when they look at that, they look at it's 350 gallons per connection per day. So if it's a house or an apartment, apartment's a little slightly less, but on average it's 350 gallons per day. I highlighted this little piece because it's wastewater is less, right? So the amount of water coming in and the amount of water going out is not the same. Not all because you're drinking it or using it for cooking, but a lot of it, but a portion of that goes towards your irrigation. We have about 11,000 meters in Kerrville. Somebody spoke, I think last week, said it was 7,000. It's incorrect. It's 11,000. There's 11,000 meters in Kerrville. Annually, we do about 1.3, give or take, billion gallons of water per year. The way that we do that, we use our run of the river first, we use our lake impoundment, then we move towards our aquifer storage and recovery, and lastly, if we need it, we go to our groundwater. I put all that up there because I wanted you to see that, if we added 1,000 new connections, that would increase the consumption by about 9–10%. And if you added 2,500 new connections, which is kind of the goal of the housing study over the next decade or 15 years or so. That would increase that consumption by 23%.
What's our consumption now, percentage-wise?
Percentage-wise of what? So we have a couple of sources, right? So this is a great conversation. We use on average for our groundwater about 20 to 25% of our permitted groundwater. Now that's groundwater that's on paper, right? So that means 80% of the water that we use from the river, and we use from our aquifer storage and recovery. I was talking to staff earlier, and I always like to find these new facts. Lately, we've been putting in 500,000 gallons a day into our aquifer storage and recovery, and we've been pulling out 100,000 gallons in. So the city of Kerrville is gaining the aquifer by about 400,000 gallons per day lately. So that's a good talking point.
And Councilmember Hughes and I don't know if this was asking on the water sources side of percentage or on, what's being used as far as residential, commercial. Those 11,000 meters comprise of irrigation, commercial, residential.
It's the
Everything.
11,000 meters, that's,
Yeah, so like a house could have 2 meters on one house because of an irrigation meter and, a house meter or just a regular consumption meter. So in 2024, on the stage 3, it was about 677 million gallons of water. A safe assumption is about 10 to 30% in there is part of irrigation. Maybe they don't have a second meter on their house. Commercial is about 260-ish million gallons of commercial use. And then irrigation this past year, just on the meters, was about 70 million gallons on just irrigation for the stage 3. During previous years, that number could have been doubled or tripled. And then we have some fire hydrants, we have some other little small, one-offs, call them miscellaneous, but that really is kind of the composition breakdown of residential, commercial, irrigation, and other.
Can we answer that question for you? Yeah,
yes.
okay. So, a lot of what staff spends their time working on with the development community is well, what does the city want, right? And so oftentimes we point to the 2050 plan, right? But we also have to point to our codes, our zoning code, our subdivision code, our utility code. And what we have are minimums. That's what every city has, right? You have to meet this standard. Your street has to be this wide. You have to have this much density. It can only be this wide, et cetera. And so, as these conversations continue, I think one of the things that we wanted to get from council and the conversation we wanted to have was, well, what do we want that to look like, right? Do we want folks coming through the doors do we want our subdivision code and our zoning code to reflect a need for, as David alluded to, kind of a low impact design for everybody new coming through the door, right? Because we don't have that in our code, right? We can talk to them about it, but there isn't a requirement until we get to a development agreement, let's say, right? If we need to, though, we can put those things into our code. David also talked about the water availability study. So we're looking through that piece, kind of talking through that. So if you're out in the county, Headwaters rules dictate that you can use 80,000 gallons per acre per year for your development, right? So the example of the Meek Ranch property, they wanted to come in at 1,100 homes, which was dense for 260 acres, right? Based on Headwaters rules on that 260 acres, I think that ends up being somewhere along the lines of 300, maybe 330 homes, something like that, based on that usage, maybe even less. And so I think as we do that water availability study, I don't think we want to be at the level where it's 80,000, because that's a countywide development. It's pretty sparse. The push is, I think, for a little more denser into Kerrville. So maybe a higher number than that, per acre per year. So we're still talking through that ideas. So basically, there's a couple things, right? So it's going to take a hot minute for HDR, who is under contract with us, to come back with additional water supply considerations for council. Here's the top 3 choices out of the 100-year water supply plan. Here's a technical memorandum for how to accomplish those things and what their recommendations are. So we're not there yet, but we know kind of what those top 3 are. Remote well field, reverse osmosis, or direct to tap, which is the hard one. You know, but also that is the most consistent source, right, that we have. And so we won't have all those until July, right? And as staff has met, we really kind of want to get a understanding of where y'all want to be, because we want to make sure that's clear for the development community, clear for y'all that we're bringing what you want to see in future developments, and they're bringing a good product back to y'all. That's something that you can be proud of, right? That really meets the spirit of where we need to be. We had a conversation with the developers and told them that was just, that there was no presentation. That was so dense. You treated that property like it was a flat piece of dirt that didn't have a giant, beautiful hill that had a home on it for the last, I don't even know how long that house has been there, for a long time. So it you know, can that be in the spirit of what Kerrville wants to be? So, and I think with that, I'm all done. I will turn it over for any questions.
Brenda, do you have any questions?
No, you mentioned reverse osmosis, and then what were the other 2?
Direct to tap and
Remote
Say
well
again?
field?
remote
tap.
field, well field, reverse osmosis, and direct to tap,
Okay.
which no one was gonna like.
Nope. But I've tried to explain, I try to give my wife the 30-second elevator speech always, see if it works. And when the water leaves the treatment plant and it flows to Comfort and to Centerpoint, it is going this short distance, right? And then it is treated at their treatment plant, and then it is put into the tap for those folks to drink. The difference is that route would be slightly shorter to our water treatment plant to then be treated and drunk. So it's a question of distance in my mind.
Everybody downstream is drinking ours.
That's exactly right.
And it's treated to a high TCEQ standard. It's treated. It's not just
Right.
nastiness going in.
You have
Now-
any questions, Brenda?
No, I'm good.
I had 2. Let's see if I can remember the second
Come
one.
back to you.
There are a fair amount of lots that are not yet sold, right? So I mean, even like at Comanche or whatever, so there's really a supply of lots that not, you know, that are available. So I guess there's some additional lots that we need to kind of have in mind that are going to come, but will be occupied.
They are those, but for the purposes of kind of this, I know we were kind of trying to tie, you know,
Right.
preservation. So the lots in Comanche outside, I think that 300 unit in the back end was not part of the original plan, but all that stuff interior has been accounted for in the usage for the water as
It's not in the current usage.
No, but it's been, I mean, it's from a staff standpoint, it has been accounted for in terms of our ability to supply that for those infill lots within Comanche Trace. Yeah.
That was something else, it was real important.
We'll come back to you.
They did a great job.
Is it possible to make some assumptions with this, the management plan that we just looked at and these potential 1,200 doors? And if we implemented some irrigation restrictions and some other things, is it possible to come up with a plan? Is that what you're gonna work on? To say, if we didn't do anything, this would happen with those new 1,200 doors. If we did part of this recommendation, maybe it's just the landscaping, native plants versus, you know, water-consuming plants. So I would kind of like to understand, and I guess that's what you meant when you're gonna come back to us with a recommendation. But that's what I would be looking at is, okay, we do need houses, but I do think if we're gonna conserve water, we need to change the way we develop. So I would love to have like a guesstimate. how much we would save if we did do some of those recommendations, because I'm not an expert on that type of thing, and I would look to you all for that recommendation, so.
So for the projects that are currently under construction, that's kind of past that
Permitted
point,
ones,
right? They're
right.
entitled, they're allowed
Okay.
to build per our standards that currently exist. So this would be,
So that's for the planned and potential.
this is where
Okay.
changes to the code would be, you know, again, if there is a development agreement, we can then require it. But if there is not a development agreement, then it's whatever's allowed by code that they would be allowed to do, so.
Okay,
And I don't really want to, I think the last was, we needed to be done.
No, I'm very good. Keep going.
The last piece, like, we talked about landscaping regulations when we were talking about tree preservation. And I think part of that was, telling people what kind of plants they need to plant and what your yard looks like. And I don't want to do any of that. I think it's more about, what type of environment, is it Houston or is it Santa Fe, New Mexico, and what do you do here in Kerrville that's in between those two? That makes the most sense, right? Not pick hydrangeas and not this, I don't even know. Just trying to outline what those parameters should be.
Commissioner McKinney.
So, the other question, so the water study that's, you're not expecting to hear back until July. We want to be able to get something in the budget for the next year if we don't get information back till July.
So, yes, sir. So when it comes to CIP planning and it comes to setting money aside, we pulled 30% off reliance of irrigation, this past year. If we make some more of those recommendations as irrigation's still going on, we are setting money aside. So, yes. Will we put it to a specific project? We will, once we get the CIP plan and stuff figured out, and we can do that at any point in time, so.
Because I'm thinking we need to start allocating money for whatever we're gonna do to get more water, it's gonna cost more money. And we need to really start as soon as possible getting that in the budget.
Yes, sir.
So can I make one shameless plug for Kerrville? So for those of you that have the opportunity to, please contact your representatives because there's $5 billion in a bill that's earmarked for water infrastructure for the state of Texas, and that's a vitally important thing. So Kerrville was on the forefront when it came to reuse, but that was a very expensive project. And what we have told the state is that it'd be a whole lot easier if we had some funding to help defray that local cost so that we all can do better as Texans. And so anyway, that's a big part of their budget review this year at the state.
My opinion that this has been a good workshop. Thank you for the water and thank you for the developments. I've been somewhat amused this week at the comments regarding our action last meeting on Meek Ranch. This council neither stuttered nor mumbled. We spoke with one voice. And I hope that staff has heard what we said.
Yes, sir.
Any other items for this workshop? Hearing none, I'm going to close it at 5:33.